Alright, so Black Myth Wukong is not done yet with the story, and there are some strong hints for some huge future DLCs. We have a bunch of data mines going around and quite a few rumors about the current story events not being what they appear to be. So lots to discuss in this video, lots to check out if they are real or not, as well as a quick spoilers warning ahead as we are going to discuss about some of the endgame stuff. But let's start with what's officially been confirmed by Game Science up until now. Reading the game's FAQ page that's still up on the site, Black Myth Wukong employs a classic one-time purchase model with one-time payment. In the future, we may release DLCs, so yes, that's a plural over there, and non-pay-to-win in-game purchases. Additionally, we encourage everyone to take a screenshot of this statement as our guarantee. So right from the lion's mouth, but the important bit over here is obviously that Game Science was already considering multiple DLCs long before the game even came out. We of course know that the game has sold at a bare minimum over 10 million copies to date, and I think that's going to make these possible future DLCs even more likely in the future. According to Statista.com, the game had already sold over 4.5 million copies by launch date, with 10 million total over the course of the 3 following days after, something that Game Science officially confirmed over their Twitter page as well by August 23rd. And now this raises a few questions: what happens next with the game? And it's also interesting to note that there were a few promotional materials before launch that featured zones and even boss fights that we haven't seen in the full game at all. In this Behind the Lore post, for example, by the official Nvidia GeForce channel from August 7th, there was a mention of the East Sea Dragon King's Palace, as well as a 20-second or so cinematic trailer. So this could potentially be a point of reference. Now, in the journey to the west, the Dragon Palace is completely submerged at the bottom of the East Sea and is described to be adorned with green jade and contains shell portals. The king is said to reside here with his wife and sons and grandsons, along with his entourage of soldiers and generals depicting various sea creatures, but also a treasure that contains many immortal weapons. And according to the lore, Sun Wukong sought to acquire some of these weapons after mastering the staff, including a long handheld scimitar, a 9-pronged fork, and a giant halberd. Of course, in the game we know that we only use 2 types of weapons, so we have the staff and, well, the semi-optional spear moveset from chapter 3 and onwards. Of course, this could just be the promotional material, maybe some fragments from the actual lore and a reference to the journey to the west, and not really something that's in-game. But I would still love to see a water zone that features a lot more of these water creatures. Obviously, we haven't seen any, or very few of those, besides maybe the frog bosses. But beyond that, I think that the addition of additional weapons sounds really interesting. Plus, of course, playing in water would mean that, yeah, one of these early armor sets that gets upgraded to mythical quality becomes even stronger, because it already gets a massive boost in healing when you fight in water. So I would really love to see something like that. Plus, having additional weapon choices sounds quite interesting. Now, we also have some alleged leaks on top of this, and I'm only going to include this because it seems a number of outlets have also referenced back to the original quote-unquote leaker. But according to Ignis, who's been doing some work on Black Myth Wukong leaks in the past, Game Science aims to release at least 2 DLCs before moving to a sequel for Black Myth Wukong. So that's a full-blown sequel, allegedly to follow and continue the story as it is in Journey to the West. The leaker mentions of some audio files sent to him of Bura and the Jade Emperor, as well as Naja. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but we have seen some footage of it in one of the end chapter 5 trailer animations. It's pretty much over here. Looks really interesting, but that seems to be an important character that eventually, according to the leaker, may make their way in the full game, alongside the Bull King, which we've also seen in chapter 5, but this time around as an actual boss battle or even a playable character. And the DLC coming, of course, to the Xbox, expected for summer 2025. Now, again, take this with a huge grain of salt. I do not believe any of this may ever come to fruition. I'm not even sure on the veridicity of this leak, but again, if there were any mentions of any audio files sent to the leaker, I was not able to find any reference of them online or any proof of the audio files altogether. Plus, we've seen a bunch of data mines going around, as we're going to check in just a little bit, pointing out that there aren't really any in-game audio files that haven't yet been discovered. Anything that, yeah, just proves any additional bosses coming in the future. But we're going to mention that in a different section a bit later on. Now, I also keep seeing some rumors about game science having initially planned for more than 6 chapters, some mentioning 12, 13, but I've seen it go all the way up to 15. Again, the sources on that, after some of the research I've done, are pretty much speculative, mostly just coming from actual players and not somebody working for the company or anything that's coming out of data mine work. I would even argue that 13 or anything above like 8 chapters sounds really unlikely, because 6 chapters was already huge. The game is big, there are multiple end zones that have very large spaces with a lot of bosses and secret areas. 13 to 15 just sounds absolutely wild and unfeasible. So yeah, maybe for some DLCs or maybe for some future sequel, possibly yes. There are of course many stories left untold, and we do have to talk about those as well. We do have a bunch of alleged data mines. Now, some of them are actually real. There were some Chinese players who actually went in and did actual data mine work, but mostly it was done to debunk some of the ridiculous claims about it. So let's start with this interesting data mine of a 3D model, possibly indicating cut content bosses, in this case depicting an elephant deity, which could tie in to a long-standing rumor about the 3 missing demon kings of the Camel Ridge, another important zone that hardcore fans were kinda expecting and surprised it never made it in the final game. So I still think it's a stretch that we will ever likely see this in the full game, also because of cultural reasons, but it's interesting to see that there is a connection between this and a long-lasting theory about the celestial court that we fight in this game not being the real celestial court from the Journey to the West, and in fact may have been corrupted or even replaced by imposters. So I've dug a bit deeper into this. I went over some of the Chinese forums and pretty much had to go through a lot of auto translations. Of course, a lot of this information may have been lost or presented not in the proper way, but we do have some English posts on the official Black Myth Wukong subreddit that kinda goes in the same direction, featuring the same information. So it is believed that the Erlang Shan that we fight at the start of the game, the royal figure that we see, is not actually the one himself, or at the very least has been corrupted in some way, and there are some very compelling clues pointing towards this. So he's supposed to actually turn into a green-faced, large-fanged lion with scarlet hair, wielding the 3-pointed, 2-edged divine spear. But in the game, the color is more akin to a grayish blue, the fangs aren't really that menacing, and there was also the question of his overall bloated look and the attire completely covered in skulls in that secret ending boss fight that we have in the game. Now, I'm not an expert on the lore, but the original isn't supposed to look this way, and according to some folks that are more familiar with, the Journey to the West story, this may all be signs of some kind of malevolent corruption, or maybe somebody impersonating him in the first place. It is noteworthy to point that despite not using the tri-point spear in the lion form, we do get that as a mythical drop at the end of the boss fight. So technically, I think that part still follows the lore at the very least. Another very interesting point is that Erlang Shan turns into dust at the end of the fight, just like typical Yao guys, the demons that we fight and defeat along the way, which doesn't really make any sense given how Erlang is actually supposed to be a deity, a god, and as a result should not die at all, let alone despawn in a similar manner to that of a corrupted being such as a Yao guy. And we know that a significantly powerful god can continue to live even with a severed head, like in the case of Lingji that we see in chapter 2. So now the question is, where does the story leave us? Well, there were some speculations, like I said, most expecting the Lion Camel Ridge to be a likely candidate as the new zone, as well as of course the demons residing in and the 3 demon kings. On one side because it's a huge part of the story and it made no sense for game science not to include it, according at least to some of the fans, but also because there are some hints of the 3 demon kings already being in the game in some way, of which they pretend of course to also take the form of Erlang that we see and we fight at the start and in the secret ending. So at the very first fight scene, there are a few already intentional close-ups that kinda hint that. So for example, in the first scene, we can see Erlang staying on the shoulder of this very huge spirit god featuring a belt that resembles an elephant trunk, possibly hinting to the yellow-toothed elephant demon. There's also the green lion waistbands worn by pretty much most of the other heavenly kings, a possible indication or connection to the azure lion demon, which is the second one, as well as the soldiers featuring the Garuda, aka the bird god helmet, possible connection to the golden eagle demon boss, also from the Camel Ridge. So this could very well be that, maybe just fans reading too much into it. I would definitely love for this to come true, because it does sound like there are way more bosses and especially demons that we have to fight in this possible DLC or sequel. Anyway, on a final note, we do have one additional rumor about the game possibly featuring more than 2 endings, or well, 3 depending if you consider the rematch a separate ending. I don't think it is, but some folks alluded to the fact that there's a 3rd and even possibly a 4th ending that yeah, you have to meet some special secret requirements to trigger in the first place. But as it stands, a Chinese player looked into it, data mined the actual game files, and pretty much debunked the whole deal, as it seems that the game files reference only 2 actual ending, or at the very least the game files do that. So there is no actual reference or anything like that to point out to a 3rd or even possible 4th ending. Plus, taking a look at the PlayStation and the Steam trophy list, it's pretty much quite clear that we only have those 2 main endings, or well, the 3rd one depending if you complete that achievement for it or not, and the rematch, but it's basically just the 2 encounters that you have, the secret and the default one. And yeah, I kind of don't want to spoil what actually happens in them, but it's on YouTube already, so you can go ahead and check them out. But I think that pretty much concludes all the current leaks, data mines, everything that's been debunked, and everything that's been at least partially true up until now. Anyway, that pretty much concludes today's video. Like, let me know down below in the comments what other features would you love to see in the game. I would definitely love a transmog system, but also maybe some different weapons, even new skills and all that kind of stuff. Again, let me know down below in the comments. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.